me. Okay, so turn it around now so that he can see the crowd. Okay, so we're going to open up the floor for questions, and of course that includes the comrade in Mexico as well. And each person got up to 3 minutes. We're going to take 4 or 5 questions, so I'm hoping the panel got their pen and paper ready so they can write down the questions, and then we'll come back and give them some time to answer them. Okay, so the first speaker, John Wonderlich.
Thank you. Thank you to the speakers. I'd like to draw everyone's attention, and I was busy with my camera, so I apologize if I miss this, but lest you think that this onslaught, as described so accurately by the speakers, is over, I will remind everyone in the room that the conservative government has promised to finally fulfill its crime agenda in the first 100 days, and in that crime agenda is something called lawful access, which provides for the state to require for internet service providers to divulge information about subscribers without a warrant. It gives the police new powers of surveillance and will require all the internet service providers in Canada over time to create back doors so that all traffic can be surveilled by the state. Needless to say, creating such back doors also creates opportunities for fraud and abuse absent state intervention. This combined with the likely implementation of privatized prisons under the Harper regime does not bode well, and whatever faith one does or does not have in the NDP as the official opposition, which is a question for another session, I suspect, clearly there needs to be a street and mass movement in support of civil liberties for one and for all. So I don't know if Ms. Jackman would care to comment on lawful access, but just, we have a lot of work ahead of us.
Thanks, John.
At the back. Barry?
I want to thank the speakers, and I want to convey our greetings to our comrades in Mexico, Jaime, and others. And I want to make this argument, essentially this, that the attack on civil liberties is a function of the crisis of global capitalism.
Hold up your microphone to you now.
Closer. The profit system is irrational, it is wasteful, it is toxic, and while capital externalizes its costs and destroys the environment, the system sends millions to the unemployment lines. It kicks millions out of their homes. It steals pensions and health benefits from millions of people. With the wealth that we create, the rulers bail out big banks and corporations. They fund their wars of pillage and occupation. They fund their prisons, their police, and their repressive actions. Now, a very good example of testing the limits of repression occurred during the G20 summit in Toronto last June. 1,200 people were arrested. Most were not charged with any crime. Many were held for 1, 2, 3, or more days in horrendous conditions during the post-arrest situation. So the question is, and by the way, the number arrested is actually 2 or 3 times as many that were arrested under the War Measures Act in October 1970 and other occasions. So the question is, why do the rulers do this? Why do they do it in Genoa? Why do they do it in England? Why do they do it in Pittsburgh, in Toronto, and all the sites of these so-called summits of big business and the governments that they control? Because they're worried about protest. They see the general strikes across Greece, across Italy, across Spain, across France, and they saw May Day around this world. This year was one of the most tumultuous, gigantic outpourings of opposition to the corporate agenda globally that we've seen in a very, very long time. So they're worried about protest. They do this out of weakness. It is not an expression of strength. They do it out of weakness, and we need to understand that. That's their solution for their crisis, to suppress us. Our solution for the crisis is democracy, economic democracy. We have to mobilize the working class to win that proposition, just as we had to in order to win all of the gains that we're defending today. We need to impose the solution of the majority for the capitalist crisis. And we in Socialist Action Canada, together with our comrades in the United States of America and in Mexico, issued a statement in 3 languages, in French, Spanish, and English, last June, and distributed to thousands of people at the time, before and after the summit. And this is part of what we wrote on that occasion. I quote, "For a world where we can all live well, workers and oppressed peoples must expropriate industry and plan the economy democratically, in concert with nature. Not a bank tax, but nationalization of the banks and big business under workers and community control is needed. Join us in the fight for a world without exploitation and war. It is urgent for everyone to choose economic democracy or corporate tyranny, eco-socialism or extinction. That's what we proudly stand with our comrades in the other countries and around the world, and we invite you to join us because that's the best and most worthwhile fight that we can wage today."
Thank you. I saw one speaker. Any other hands that I've missed? Okay, John O.
Oh, that was awfully quick. I just put my hand up.
Oh, wow.
I have to
You
find
must have been a good
out.
guy.
I have to find out the policy. Well, put me on the next one, okay?
Oh, you're not ready yet?
No,
Okay,
just
Sonny?
give me for 1 sec.
Hola. There's a problem with the war on drugs. It just doesn't work. More people do drugs, and there are people pushing for relaxation of the medical marijuana use, and that's already being challenged in Canada. And I think that when we look at the money that the federal government is increasing their spending on, it's in the area of prison security and maybe purchasing engineless jet fighters so we can have military adventures in the Middle East. But in Toronto, we have a mayor who talks about cutting back and shit like that, but gives the cops 11.4% increase in their pay at a time when the crime rate's going down because we have an aging population. Maybe there are not as many angry men under the age of 30, blah, blah, blah. But we hear these stories about the black neighborhoods. Oh, well, there's black on black crime, and it's usually like white guys on right-wing talk radio, and they propose these solutions on policing the community and so forth. And it's pretty racist, I think. And the reality is it could be poverty or lack of opportunity, which is why black people are treated so poorly. And as for the upcoming omnibus bill that's being proposed, I think it is dangerous, and we need to watch what they're going to do because it's becoming a surveillance society. Like if Bill Blair can keep the cameras from the G20 when originally it was only meant for the G20, then it's a bait and switch. And I think that with what's being proposed, like if they're going to scrap the gun registry, then hey, people could buy guns and then commit crimes, and then maybe they'll fill their jails full of people commit crimes, and then they can criminalize the poor and people of color. So I wonder if you can clarify that vein. Thanks.
Okay, so we got 2 more speakers, Steve and then John O, and then we'll come back to the panel. Steve Shorter.
Steve? Hello. I was wondering, we're seeing a lot of transformations in the state very quickly, and I'm starting to wonder at what point does this institution, which we should think of as a model of a public institution, like if the government's not a public institution, then what is? At what point does the democratic institutions decay to the point where it's no longer has a public character? And if it's no longer a public institution, then what kind of institution is it? And I would offer maybe we are seeing corporate governance, systems of corporate governments start to succeed the state apparatus. And I think Mussolini said something about that. I'm not sure what it was. But I wonder if you could comment. At what point do we say this is no longer a democratic and a public institution? Thanks.
Okay, yes, John O.
Well, Sonny talked about a lot of what I was going to talk about, but I would like to tell Jaime that the Socialist Caucus of the NDP is going to Vancouver in about a month We're going to bring forward a resolution that calls for the elimination of all fines and criminal penalties for personal cultivation and possession of cannabis, and an amnesty for anybody convicted of the same. And we also want a model set up that's going to actually help people who have drug problems and put our money into education and treat it as a health problem. What we don't want is we don't want a society where people can't just grow a plant and smoke it. And we don't want millions of dollars spent on law enforcement and millions on a judicial system for lawyers and police, and we don't want a penal system where people are incarcerated at $40,000 a year, and we don't want dispossessed Latin Americans being used as mules and being criminalized for the smoking of drugs in the richer part of North America. So we're all for your struggle down there in Mexico, and buena suerte.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to come back to the panel. I'll do a second round, but Chris, I'll get back to you. Come back to the panel, and we'll start with Jeff, and then Barbara, and then Jaime.
Well, I didn't finish.
5 minutes.
I didn't finish my remarks on fascism, and Steve gave me a good introduction to answering it. He said, at what point do the institutions of a democratic society become... Louder. At what point do the institutions of a democratic, in quotes, society become corporatized, and that is where there is no democracy? Trotsky, I think, gave the best definition of fascism ever. And he was the first one to predict its consequence. No one else thought that Hitler was a threat, like Trotsky. In fact, the Allies during World War II preferred Hitler to the Soviet Union and hoped to make a pact with Hitler so he would turn his troops on to the Soviet Union, which he did eventually. But Trotsky said that fascism was that political form of capitalist rule that is turned to by the ruling class when the very existence of capitalism is incompatible with the existence of an organized working class. Germany had the largest working class in the world, the most unionized, and it was divided between two parties, mass communist and socialist parties, that had strikes that could cripple the entire economy in the context of Germany being the loser, in quotes, in the First World Imperialist War, World War I, and therefore losing its economic power to the United States, Britain, and France. So the, quote, democratic leaders of Germany turned to fascism because their industry was incapable of competing on world markets. They had lost their colonies, and they could not tolerate a functioning capitalist system with an organized working class that was there to challenge it. The potential for socialism was the greatest in Germany, and it had to be smashed by force. Hitler's first actions was to destroy the organizations of the working class, the unions, and the communist and socialist parties. It was only later that he turned against the Jewish people and annihilated 6 million people. But it was the organized threat posed by the revolution that worried him the most. The ruling class does not prefer fascism. They prefer democracy, in quotes. They prefer to have happy workers going to work every day with a smile on their faces, thinking that they are going to make their way in the world. Like the 7 dwarfs. Hi ho, hi ho. So off to work I go, and I'm very happy about it. They only turn to repression when they can no longer function in competition on the world market. But the American ruling class is not stupid. They sense, as Barry said, their weakness. They know that their rates of profit are falling to historic levels, which we'll talk about tomorrow night. They know that their system is in trouble. And they know that they have no way out other than to take it out of the hides of the working class, of lower wages, smash pensions, smash unions, and so on. And they fully expect the resistance, which is the reason we're here.